So thank you very much for joining us here today for our session on imposter syndrome. I'll just introduce myself and the One Group for those of you who might not be aware of us. My name is Leanne and I am the marketing manager here at the One Group. And the One Group is a recruitment agency, and I'm currently sitting in our Peterborough office. We also have offices in Cambridge and Northampton, and we service the recruitment needs of our clients in Cambridgeshire, Peterborough, Northamptonshire, Hertfordshire and surrounding areas. Our divisions are accountancy and finance, HR, professional services, IT and technology, engineering, sales and marketing. So if you do need any help with your recruitment needs, please get in touch with us and we'll be happy to help. So the reason for this session today on imposter syndrome. So at the One Group, we're really strong believers in being yourself. And when we interview any new candidates for roles within the One Group, we really try and get to know people on a personal level, because we feel that, you know, if you can be yourself and feel comfortable and confident in your workplace, then we'll get the best out of people. So earlier this year, we launched a BU campaign, which basically was that, all about being yourself. If you're looking for a new job, on the job hunt, how to be yourself on your CV, how to be yourself in an interview, and also how to find that company that is actually right for you and aligns with your values and aspirations, because there's nothing worse than being in a company that you just don't fit in with. So being able to be yourself and be happy builds this amazing culture, and then everyone's happy. As part of being a recruitment agency, we do have a lot of candidates who have an amazing skill set, loads of experience, fountain of knowledge, and we think that we've got an amazing opportunity for them. But when we approach them about this opportunity, there's something that's holding them back. Maybe they don't feel like they're qualified enough, but perhaps it's imposter syndrome. So we decided to build imposter syndrome into our BU campaign, and we've got an amazing guest host with us today, Julie Marsh, who I'll introduce you to shortly. But Julie's going to take us through the whole journey of imposter syndrome, trying to understand it, trying to overcome it when it hits, and some strategies in place so you can go for that new job, or you can put your name down for that promotion, or you can take on that new project, or even in your personal life, because imposter syndrome can strike there as well too. We want you all to be able to be confident and be yourselves. So I'm really looking forward to this session and to hear what Julie has to say. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So if you do have any questions throughout, please pop them in there and we will try our hardest to answer them at the end of the session. If you do have to leave at any point, don't worry, this is being recorded and we will send this out to you after the session too. And you may have seen a poll pop up earlier asking if you've ever actually experienced imposter syndrome yourself. It would be really interesting to see the answers to that poll, to see if actually we have all experienced it and it is just something that we don't really talk about. So we're here today to get to the bottom of it and hear what Julie has to say. So let me introduce you to Julie Marsh. Please take it away, Julie.
Thanks so much. So firstly, welcome to today's webinar on masking imposter syndrome. And a massive thank you to you all for taking time out of your day to come and join me in the One Group on this really, really important subject. So I'm Julie. I'm the founder of BU Consultancy and Coaching. I'm based in Peterborough. Really honoured to be with you all today, and thank you to the One Group for their wonderful BU campaign. I thought it'd be a really good opportunity to tell you a bit about myself and a bit about BU Consultancy. So, who am I? Well, I've got 24 years working in HR. 15 of those years, I've worked in management and leadership, and actually the last 10 years I've worked as a senior leader. My last roles within the corporate world was head of UK HR and head of DE&I International. I've got a master's in human resource management. I'm an NLP practitioner, which is neuro-linguistic programming. I'm a DISC accredited partner. I'm also a finalist for Peterborough Small Business Awards 23, which is absolutely amazing. And I enjoy being a solo explorer. So I like traveling the world on my own. But I'm also an imposter syndrome survivor, and that's why I wanted to talk to you all today, to find out about how we can work to unmask our imposter syndrome. BU Consultancy and Coaching was founded last year, and we provide a range of services to individuals, from sole traders through to organisations, whether they're looking for HR consultancy, coaching, training services, or analysing motivational drivers. We work with our customers to unlock their potential for future business success. Now, you can see from the slide, I've got two very interesting characters as part of the business. And these are my two Frenchies, Lola and Bertie. They're an integral part of the business concept and the creation. With their help, we support local charities through from being an emergency foster home for Frenchies, and Nola's just started her journey being a pet therapy support dog. But what on earth does that have to do with imposter syndrome? Well, as I mentioned, I'm a survivor, and all of my experiences have helped me reduce my symptoms and enabled me to embrace me, hence the name Be You. So, imposter syndrome, well, what is it? We know it can be experienced at different levels and also completely different intensities depending on the individual. But it's really important to highlight, if you want to talk after the session, please do reach out. So my first question for you to consider is, are you doubting your abilities right now? If so, what's driven that? It may be that you've had a conversation with someone, but it may be just your mind chatter that's on full speed. But it's really important for you to be aware of the impact of imposter syndrome on you. If you aren't aware of why, it will be hard to reduce any symptoms you may experience. Now, we've just seen the results of the poll, and 91% of you have experienced imposter syndrome. So let's find out more, and let's start off with the theory that can be linked into imposter syndrome. So, in the previous slide, I referred to mind chatter. Well, this is what my mind chatter looks like to me. They're all gremlins in my head, telling me I can, I can't, I should, I shouldn't, I will, I won't. Now, some people, they say that they've only got one. And I've got a really good friend of mine, Jo, who names hers Edna. That way, she can identify and become aware that it's Edna talking. Other terminology for mind chatter is monkey mind or mental chatter. But what mind chatter is it involves negative self-talk, self-criticism, worry and thoughts about previous or future events. Mind chatter is really common among all of us. And it can especially be experienced if you're feeling anxious or you're feeling stressed. How often do you listen to the mind chatter? Now, Freud separated the mind into distinct levels, and actually he gave each level its own role, its own function. So we've got the conscious mind. That's the part that contains all the thoughts, the memories, the feelings, and wishes that we're aware of at any given moment. This is the aspect of our mental processing that can think and talk about it rationally. It also includes our memory, which isn't always part of the conscious, but can be retrieved easily and brought into awareness. Then you see we've got the preconscious mind. That consists of anything that could potentially be brought into the conscious mind. And then at the bottom, we've got the unconscious mind. That's a reservoir of feelings, thoughts, urges, memories that are outside of our conscious awareness. The unconscious contains contents that may be unacceptable or unpleasant. such as feelings of pain, anxiety, conflict. Freud likened the 3 levels of the mind to an iceberg. So at the top where you can see it, you've got your conscious mind. Then just flapping at the sea level, you've got the pre-conscious mind. But the bulk of the iceberg, what lies beneath, what you can't see, represents the unconscious. While the information is in the conscious mind and it's outside of our awareness, it does continue to influence how we feel about things, our behaviour. So some of the ways it can influence our behaviours is through, well, negative thoughts, self-defeating thoughts and behaviours. So that mind chatter, feelings of anger, compulsive behaviour, attitudes about others, unhealthy habits, as well as some others. So here we're starting to build a picture that with Freud's levels and that mind chatter sitting in our unconscious minds, it becomes apparent on how we start to experience symptoms. But let's have a look at our final model, and that's the NLP communication model. This model is also known as the face map, and it shows us how we process information and how that can impact our behaviour. So let's take an event, an experience. Your boss says to you, "Can I just have 5 minutes?" Without realising it, you're applying all of these filters. So you apply filters to generalise what's going on, to delete information about what's going on, to distort information about what's going on. You're using your conscious and your unconscious. And then you take that information, add further filters to it, where you apply your values. You apply how you're feeling, which is your state. If you're having a bad day, that impacts how you feel. Then physiology. And then from all of those different filters, thoughts, experiences, out pops our behaviour. It's really important to consider that a mind chatter sits with our unconscious mind, which then impacts how we feel about situations, and therefore that impacts our behaviour. So whilst we've got a good idea of the theory, let's have a look at some of what the symptoms are. So as mentioned earlier, it's really important to remember that individuals can experience different symptoms and different levels of intensity. And of course, on different days, depending on where the sun is in the sky, there is no rhyme or reason. But as you can see from the slide, there's lots of different symptoms. Some may be relevant, some maybe not. It isn't an exhaustive list, and that's for me where the real challenge comes from. Because there's no checklist to say, I feel this way, therefore I must have. It's more about identifying what you feel and then asking yourself why you feel that way. So why do you have a constant fear of not meeting expectations? Why do you work excessively long hours and over-prepare for projects? Asking the why question, that's empowering you to become aware of your feelings and to have that conscious check-in. If we only think about imposter syndrome unconsciously, it makes it harder to address it, harder to change it, harder to change how we feel. I know I mentioned this earlier, but it's really important to highlight that if this subject does have an impact to you and you need to talk to someone, you can reach out through the One Group, you can contact me directly, you can speak to a friend, a colleague, a manager, or someone who can support you. Symptoms can actually really impact your well-being and your functioning. So whilst it sounds like it could be a really light-hearted subject, for some actually the impact can be great. But to understand imposter syndrome, we need to know a bit more about the facts of what it is we're actually dealing with. So imposter syndrome was first documented in 1978, so over 40 years ago. Dr. Klein and Imes noted that women in high achieving positions complained of feeling self-doubt, incompetence, and fear of not performing well in the future. But over time, it was noticed that actually imposter syndrome impacts males as well as females. Now, during 2022, HRdirector.com completed a survey of the UK workforce. They found 85% of the UK workforce had experienced imposter syndrome. 85%. So I'm going to ask you to think about whether you've spoken to anyone about coming to this webinar today, and did they say to you, oh, I don't believe in that, or I don't get imposter syndrome. Do you think that that's the truth? Do you think that they would fall into those 15% of people that don't experience it? Or do you think that maybe they're not aware? But let's just think about that 85% of UK workers. I mean, to me, that's like guessing the weight of the ocean. It's impossible. It doesn't seem real. If we look at the ONS figures, so the Office of National Statistics, and we take September 22, there were 29.8 million people working in the UK. So that means 25.3 million people experienced imposter syndrome. 25.3 million. And also, whilst it was initially noted by Plain and Imes as being experienced in highly achieving positions, it can also be experienced in personal lives. And I truly believe this can be increased through social media, where people show a life that isn't necessarily theirs, where it's just maybe a rehash of old photos. Have you ever thought someone travels a lot? They're always on holiday. It could just be a collection of photos. It doesn't have to be the here and now. So let's now take a look at the what. We've looked at the symptoms, and we've now just looked at the facts. So, as we've spoken about, imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon where individuals doubt their achievements, their skills, their abilities. And if we think about the symptoms that we saw earlier in slides, we also know it can vary for each individual. But the symptoms aren't based on reality. It's based on an individual's perceptions. So within the NLP terminology, that's where we'd bring in the face map. That's where we'd think about how we feel is actually based on previous experiences and the filters that we apply to that. As we talked about, your manager says that they need you for 5 minutes. You may think, oh, that's it, I'm in trouble now. But where is that thought coming from? Is that thought coming from a previous experience that you've had? But now maybe you're in a new role. Maybe it's a new manager. Maybe it's a new day. Maybe it's not going to be the same impact. The most important thing to remember is that there's sun behind that cloud, that imposter syndrome can be managed. But why do some of us experience it? So some of the reasons why can be linked to perfectionism. Individuals who strive for perfection in all they do can build imposter syndrome. If they're critical of their work and they set themselves these high expectations, then this could quite easily build feelings of fear, of failure, of just not being good enough, not hitting that mark. We've then got our social comparisons. So what we were saying, how many people judge their lives by what they see on social media? This is what can happen in imposter syndrome. If we compare how others are against ourselves, remembering that we never see the full picture, it can be really easy to compare yourself. And then, for good measure, throw in the mind chatter too. When you've achieved something, do you think, oh, that was lucky, got away with that one? or, well, I did have help. Those thoughts can build imposter syndrome in our minds. When we put our achievements down to something else rather than just saying thank you. You know, I was really fortunate to partner with so-and-so. For me, this is about how we frame the experience and how we respond to compliments. Underrepresentation. So this can either be being part of or feeling underrepresented within a group. So stereotypes, social pressures can make an individual question their qualifications or whether they belong in the room, whether they deserve success. I remember dreading external meetings with professionals who would always talk around their uni experiences. That was because I didn't go to uni. I didn't take that route. So I felt that maybe I shouldn't be part of that group. What about our early experiences? So if someone is exposed to excessive criticism, or they're put under pressure to succeed, that can contribute. So, for example, you've got a child that's made to feel that all they do isn't good enough. Maybe they develop a belief that they're not good enough, they're unworthy of success, and actually that can transfer into adult life. And finally, what about high achieving environments? If you're working in a highly competitive environment, if you're studying in that environment, that can foster imposter syndrome. It can create that sense of insecurity, the fear of not being able to measure up to the right standards. So let's apply this. I'll tell you about my experience. Well, to me, it's a normal life. I'm really privileged that my parents are still alive. I've got a brother, I've got a sister-in-law, and I've got a niece. A normal life. Though at school, I was always told that I wouldn't amount to much. So there was no point in trying. I felt that I wasn't the intelligent one in the family. Now, how many of you are nodding at that right now? And it's safe to say that I didn't do well in school. But at college, a lot of things clicked into place for me in time. And eventually I started my profession. I studied hard and I achieved. But it was at that point I really started to notice my imposter syndrome. I'd work all hours because, well, whatever I did, it was never good enough. My work started to take over the rest of my life, and due to my level in organisations, I tended to stay away from colleagues and didn't have close relationships. And then my mind chatter increased. And that was a cycle that I was to experience over and over again. I pushed and pushed for bigger and better, but then found myself comparing me to others and thinking, well, why was I in the boardroom? And people would work out that I didn't know what I was doing. If I was going to fail, it would be a fall from a great height. And actually, if my team failed, that was 100% on me. That was a failure in my capability. Does that sound familiar to you? But when we're thinking of imposter syndrome, do we think who it can really impact? Because it's not just one person. Now, I know we've been through the numbers, but have we thought about who else can be impacted? It's really important to consider this because actually your interactions, the next conversation that you have with someone, they could be experiencing imposter syndrome. So be mindful of that. If we think about the high-profile celebs, business owners, these people on screen, they've all come and said they suffer with imposter syndrome. And whilst you may think, how on earth can they? The fact that they're talking about it, that fact can change our futures. If imposter syndrome becomes that conversation, it takes away that internal pressure of individuals to realise that other people are experiencing imposter syndrome symptoms. I remember being absolutely amazed at a seminar where there were about 300 people in attendance, and we were asked who'd ever experienced imposter syndrome, and nearly everyone in that room put their hand up. That one action, it changed something in me. It made me realise I wasn't alone, and if I wasn't alone, then I could do something about it. I could change something. Now, for those of you that know me, you'll know that in life I always believe that there is opportunities. And I think that even the case of if we're going through imposter syndrome, there's opportunities for positivity. So reframing the thoughts of imposter syndrome is important, as it helps with changing how we think about it. We could see this way as actually a really good way to motivate ourselves to improve. But in order to do that in a more healthy way, we need to be kind to ourselves. So that could include being humble, being open to learning. It's okay not to know. Having empathy and support for others, being mindful that they may be experiencing imposter syndrome. Being aware of that perfectionism. When is good enough? Having the ability to pay attention to detail. And by learning more about ourselves, we're increasing our self-awareness. And that can help us in terms of building strategies to minimize imposter syndrome, but also enables us to become more authentic. So if we understand the why, we can then focus on the how. When we think of imposter syndrome, how many of us just accept it? You know you're experiencing it. You think, oh, that's imposter syndrome right there. Do you put in a strategy to help minimize it? If not, let's talk about what we can do to reduce that for all of us. And these are just some ideas. So recognize and acknowledge how you feel, whether that's through journaling, whether it's through just making notes. Consider what it was you were feeling. What was the environment? Were you under pressure? Were you tired? Were you hungry? Had you had the right amount of sleep? Note down what's going on inside your mind. Then you can look for similarities. Reframe your thoughts. If can't, won't, never, change those words. Add yet to your sentence. I can't do that yet. In the next slide, I'm going to give you some examples of how you can do this, so you can give it a go, see how it feels. Talk about it. Whether that's to family, friends, even work colleagues, even if you take this webinar back to your team as a starting point. Record your achievements. Put a folder in your inbox. So when you get that feedback, put it in. Reflect on it. Have a jar of achievements that you look at. Think about what other strategies you can implement. Set realistic goals. Now you can do this by looking at and separating your goals into step goals and end goals. Your end goals are the really, really big ones. You want to buy a house. Your step goals is, well, how are you going to get there? What are the different deadlines you need to meet in order to get to the end goal? Review and reflect on those often. Embrace failure. It's fine. After all, it's our first attempt in learning. Getting that support from your leader. Talk, ask for feedback, reflect. Find a coach, find a mentor. Practice self-care. Look after yourself. Whether that's through meditation, yoga, walking, sleeping for the right amount of time, hydration, making sure you're eating the right foods. So when we're thinking about reframing, it's when a behaviour or a trait can be changed into a positive intention. So as I mentioned, it's really important for the success of reducing imposter syndrome. And here's some of the examples that you can try. So if I'm saying to myself, actually, I'm not going to live up to these expectations and they're going to find out really soon that I'm a fraud, change that into saying, do you know what, I've really stretched myself for this and I'm confident with the work I've achieved. Can you see the difference that we're saying the same? The second example, this needs to be perfect, otherwise it's a complete failure and I'm going to get sacked. How about saying, I've worked really hard on this. Any feedback I receive is going to be great for my development. So we're seeing feedback as a positive rather than a criticism. We're acknowledging that we've worked really hard and actually we're good with what we've done. Every individual can find their own strategies on how to tackle imposter syndrome. And for me, the strategies I apply are journaling. Now, I don't journal at a set time, set day, set week. I journal when I want to journal, so I free journal. I enjoy looking at the mountains, which may sound strange, especially in Peterborough where there are none. But I enjoy it. I enjoy looking at the mountain and consider the things that are going on inside my head, my mind chatter, and thinking, do you know what, this mountain's probably seen this 1,000,000 times and it's still standing. Is it that great? Is it a showstopper? I also really enjoy yoga. I enjoy reflecting. I have a coach. I have a mentor. They support me. I enjoy networking. I enjoy talking to people, finding out about them. Meditation. I watch what I eat. I enjoy walking. I track my sleep and I reframe my thoughts. So today we've talked through imposter syndrome. We've talked through how many people have experienced it in 2022, when it was initially documented, the fact it can be experienced by everyone in both personal and professional lives, that it isn't based on reality. It's on a person's perceptions. You know, remember the iceberg from Freud, that communication model, the mind map, the mind chatter, and the fact that imposter syndrome can be transformed into a positive experience if you put the strategies in place to manage it. However, if you only take a few things from our time together today, I'd ask that you do remember it's not based on reality. Be patient and kind to yourself. The symptoms can be managed. Everyone experiences self-doubt. Everyone. Reframe your thoughts, reframe your sentences, reframe your actions. This is a psychological phenomenon. And if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, it's okay. So thank you all so much for your time. And again, thank you to the One Group.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was a really interesting session. Thank you. We did have some questions sent in actually previous to this webinar, but I have a question myself. What do you think that we can do to increase the awareness of imposter syndrome within a working environment?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. So thank you for that. For me, it's talking about it. For me, it's raising that awareness that actually this is something that people experience and can really impact them. So whether that's you're talking about it as part of your one-to-ones, team meeting, or over a coffee, that people are showing that side, the vulnerability that actually they experience it, because that will provide strength to not only them so that they become more self-aware, but to others that they're interacting with. And that's so powerful. And then the other person will more than likely do the same.
And what if you talk about it at work, like to your manager or someone like that, but then they turn around to you and say, oh, I don't believe in imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, isn't it? It really is. I think then they could, if they have one, they could go and talk to their HR team. They could talk to their colleagues. If they're in a union, they could talk to their rep. They've possibly got a employee assistance program, so something called an EAP. Or it might be that they want to research it more on Google. They might want to reach out to me to have a discussion about it, reach out to the one group. There's so many different avenues that individuals can take to find out more, to help build those strategies. It's not solely reliant on whether your manager believes in it or not. And the chances are maybe they're just not aware of it.
Yeah. So the questions that have come in, what impact do you think the virtual world has had on imposter syndrome and will have on imposter syndrome in the future?
So I think this is a really relevant question for today. Previous to today, if I was asked that, I would say an awful lot. I think if we think about that comparison that we always make when we see social media, and I'm no different. If I'm scrolling through Insta and think, oh, someone's always traveling, or look at the size of their house, haven't they done well for themselves? I compare that to where I'm at, but actually I don't know their full story. So why should I? Where I think that's changed recently is we've probably seen all the news with regards to what's happened at the BBC over the last couple of days and the presenter Hugh. Now, at the beginning of that time, social media was very determined to find out who it was. They wanted the name. However, now Hugh's wife has spoken out. We've seen quite a quick pivot with social media, where it's much more talking about mental health. It's talking about, have we done the right thing? What have the BBC done to support the presenter? And I think actually that's where we start to see that change in social media. As we've talked about mental health, the impact of mental health, and there's been some horrific tragedies with, if we think about Caroline Flack, for example, of the impact that social media can have on individuals, that now we're seeing that transfer to, we want to know who it is, but actually now we're really concerned for their well-being. And I think the more we talk about imposter syndrome, the more we can see that happening as well, and it will follow suit. But I don't think we're there yet.
There are a couple of questions that have come on in the question and answer box. The first one is, what support should I expect from my manager around imposter syndrome?
That's an interesting one, because it's dependent. I think it's dependent on what support you want. Do you know what it is that you want? And actually, have you spoken to your manager about it? Is that a conversation that you're having, or is that a conversation maybe you're wanting to start to have? Because I think that can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
There's no guidance as such as this, as a manager, this is what you should do for imposter syndrome. It's more about you as an individual working out, well, what support would you like? And actually, if it's getting feedback, ask for it. That's okay, and that will support you.
So where can people get additional support from?
So, as I mentioned, internally within their organisation, I imagine that individuals' employee assistance programs, so the EAPs, will likely have some information. HR teams. Again, you can contact myself, you can contact the one group, or you can Google it, which is such a great terminology of just Google it. There will be information on there, but remember, not all of the information may be accurate. It's got to come with that caveat.
And then the final question, unless anyone else pops another one in, is what do you do if the strategies don't work?
It's a good question as well. Change them. So because imposter syndrome is based on all of those different filters, all of those different experiences that we've got, you've got to work out what strategies are right for you as an individual. And it's going to be a trial and error. I really would love to be someone who's really dedicated to journaling. I'd love that. I've even got the time in my diary allocated on a Sunday to journal on my week. I never do that because I just naturally prefer to do it when it comes to me. So whilst I want something, that doesn't fit in with me. So I then changed my approach to it so it does work. And I think that's going to be the trick for everyone, is try things, see how it works, but review and reflect on how you feel afterwards.
Yeah, I like that approach. We have had a couple of people sharing their experiences as well in the Q&A box. Someone said that there's no such thing as failure, only feedback, which I think is really good. And someone else has said that they suffered quite badly with imposter syndrome, and talking about it helped.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Julie, and everyone for joining us today, and for all your insights. It was really informative and interesting, and I hope everyone else feels the same too. We will be sending out this recording and the slides to everyone who's attended. And Julie is always available as well if you need to reach out for some time in with her. And also don't forget to take a look at our website, because we do have some other events and webinars coming up. And also we have a podcast, so take a look at that and remember to subscribe. We've got some really interesting topics coming up. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you again, Julie. It's been a really good session. Bye.
Thank you.